What would the world look like if everyone acted like a leader and not a victim of circumstance? This is the Leaders of Transformation podcast. And on this show, we interview difference makers and world changers who are disrupting for good. I'm your host, Nicole Jansen, and our guest today is Ron Karr. He has worked with leaders and organizations around the world on 6 continents, eliminating risk, gaining buy-in, and teaching them how to achieve better results faster with the velocity mindset. Over the past 30 years, his presentations and advisory services have generated over $1 billion in incremental revenues for his clients. He is the author of the best-selling book, Lead, Sell, or Get Out of the Way. And his latest book is Velocity Mindset. And today we're going to talk about the velocity mindset. We're going to talk about focus. How do you stay focused in the midst of adversity and all the stuff that's going around? And how do you bust through your limiting beliefs so that you can turn your vision, get back to the vision that you originally had, and turn it into reality? So I'm excited to have him here. Ron, welcome to Leaders Transformation.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be on the show with you today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. And let's talk about this idea of velocity mindset. First of all, what does it mean? What is it?
Sure.
What is, I know you have a specific definition when you talk about velocity. Let's just sort of start there.
Well, when you hear the word velocity, what's the first word that comes to your mind?
Fast.
Yeah. And Nicole, that's what it,
yeah.
Exactly. And that's what everybody says. Some say momentum, but it's really about, the velocity connotates speed, right? And we all want velocity. But speed by itself is not velocity, and speed by itself does not help you go faster. In fact, it can burn you out.
I can attest to that.
Yeah, we all can. And the best way I can explain it is we all have to-do lists, right?
Yeah.
And how many times have we been going to that to-do list on a given day and we're so proud of ourselves because we're completing. We have no time to eat lunch. At the end of the day, we're totally exhausted and we're so glad we finished that whole list. But then we ask ourselves, but how come I'm not feeling good? Because I feel like I haven't moved the needle.
Yeah.
Have you been there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we all have. So one of the things that comes out of that is that we tend to get task-driven versus purpose-driven. Now let's go back to the definition of velocity. The true definition, the physics definition of velocity is speed with direction. It's that direction that's really the key component that tells us whether or not we're gonna be able to get to where we want. Let me put it this way. You go to an airport, let's say in Newark, New Jersey, you want to go to Miami, right? And you ask the pilot, hey, where we're going? And they say, wherever the winds take us, would you stay on that plane?
No.
The answer is no. So they start with the end in sight first, the direction. They start with Miami. Here's where we're going to go. Then they work their way back and they figure the 2 or 3 waypoints so they know if they're in the air, they go over that waypoint, they're on their way. They also factor in the potential obstacles, storms, winds, whatever, and they come up with a flight plan that's the safest way and the fastest way to get there. But it all started with the end in sight first, the destination, Miami. And that is so critical. Where are you trying to go? Whether it's a sales call, what's the end result that you want? Whether it's a year in business, what's the end result that you want? A relationship, what does the successful relationship looks like to you? Your life, what do you want to have accomplished in your life? It all starts with that. Because if you're not driven by purpose, then you're going to have those days where you're doing a lot of work, but not getting what you want, and then feeling depressed about it.
Yeah. What
that destination also does, Nicole, it gives us what you mentioned in the introduction, that a lot of us tend to lack sometimes, especially when we get off purpose. It gives us focus. What we focus on is what we tend to do. So why is it so important? Well, I'll give you an example. Let's take a sales executive, right? They're going on their first call with an account that they were dreaming of getting, right? And let's suppose their sales cycle is 5 calls. It takes 5 times to meet with the client to get the deal. And I asked the person, so what's your goal for the call? Oh, I want to close this client. I said, really? What number in the sales cycle is this? Number 1. So you're going to go in there with the goal of closing the call, the account. Yeah. then that means all you're going to do is puke people who are the knowledge about everything. You're going to be self-focused. It's all about you getting the deal. You're going to talk to them about a lot of things you could do for them where it's 90% they're not even interested in. You lose their attention. They're not even engaged with it, even though they may be sitting there. That's why you need to have the appropriate goal or purpose in mind, because that dictates the decisions you make. It dictates the actions that you take, and it lets you then stay on point. And that is the way you gain velocity, by having the outcome out there, making the right decisions, and then doing the right actions to get to where you want to be. And one of two things will happen. You'll either figure that you really can achieve it, or if not, you'll figure out sooner or later, this is not what you're going to be able to achieve, and you can pivot, but at least you won't be wasting a lot of time and having a lot of heartbreak along the way.
Well, I think that it's so profound, and yet at the same time, how often do we forget to do this? Like, I think about right now, we're in March as the time of this recording. It's going to come out this month. And, people have set their New Year's resolutions, and they've said, this year we're going to do this thing, or we're going to achieve these goals in our business or sales or whatever it is, relationship. And a lot of times I find that we're setting goals because it sounds like a nice idea. It's like I call it the nice idea versus, or the nice to have versus the gotta have. And so to your point, we're busy, 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 and we're not really getting that fulfillment. So I think of one of my mentors who describes certain personality types as saying, lost, like they're so driven, they're so focused and so forth, that they're lost sometimes, but they're making good time. And I think we can relate to that. And so this is such an important topic, especially right now. In your analogy about the plane taking off, going from New Jersey to Miami, I think about right now, it's not only just going from New Jersey to Miami and knowing that that's where you want to go, but what do you do when there's turbulence? What do you do when the weather's really bad in New Jersey when you're taking off or up there in the air? And I think that's where a lot of people are right now, where it's just like, man, I didn't expect this to happen the last few years. And where they're so stuck in one, like it has to be this way in order for everything, all the ducks to line in. And that's not how life works. So can you talk about that? And you talk about focus and how important that is in this.
Well, first of all, you just said we're all stuck in it, we're married, and what happens if something happens? Yeah, my daughter was just here visiting me, and she was talking about doing something, and what if it doesn't work? And I said, if it doesn't work, then you're gonna figure out what to do. Don't worry about if it doesn't work. It will come to you. All right. Mm-hmm. If you have the right thinking process going on at the same token. Okay. So we can't be married to certain results. If you're so married and it doesn't get there, what's your backup? What's your pivot? Mm-hmm. The reason why a lot of our New Year's resolutions fail is because we're not invested in it emotionally. We're just doing a task for the sake of doing it. People tell us we should have a New Year's resolution, but are you really passionate about it? To think about identifying a goal, and I've had this problem myself, still do. I know my clients have had it. When I ask them, what is it that you want to achieve in life? Very few people can answer that because they don't know. They find it hard to get to that space. And what I've learned along this journey is, for leaders, everybody is afraid to think about that because they feel they have to have the answers up front on how to get there.
Yes.
And that's not true.
They got to have all the green lights. They got to know every step of the way.
Leaders are not being paid to have the answers up front. Yeah. Leaders are being paid to have an idea of where we need to go, and then going out and asking the right questions that leads to the answers. So then you get the right team and you do the right actions to get to where you want to be. That's what a leader's job is. Yeah. It is not to come up with how can you have the answers? So in the book, The Velocity Mindset, Dr. Nito Cobain wrote the foreword, and he's the president of High Point University, a true success story in his own right. And I interviewed him after the book came out. And I said, so Nito, you came from Lebanon with $15 in your pocket and by yourself. You settled in High Point. You must have had a vision about the success you wanted. And he had a great distinction here, Nicole. He said, Ron, True, I had a vision as to the life I wanted to live. Here's the distinction. Drum roll, please. He said the clarity of the vision only comes from walking the journey.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So when you
Yeah.
hear that, it takes pressure off your shoulders. We all have this stress. We have to have it all figured out. No, you don't. You have to have an idea of what you want to create for yourself. You have to have an idea that's passion, because you need that passion, because things are going to come up that are going to question you, knock you off the track. Is your passion going to be like that magnet that brings you back on so that you can keep going forward and doing whatever it takes to figure it out? That's what you need at the beginning. If you're making a goal and it's not hitting you here, get rid of it, because it means you're not vested in it. Now, once you have that, then you start asking the right questions, you start thinking about it, and then the answers will come to you. But if you don't have an idea as to where we need to go, because this is where the market's going, this is where the world's going, and this is the way I want to do it because this is what brings the best out of me, now let's go figure out how we make it work.
Talk about questions, because I know questions were transformative. In my life, I used to ask the wrong questions, and of course, I got the wrong answers. And you talk about in your book some of the powerful questions that you've asked your clients. And even I remember this one story where you talk about, they were going to go into this meeting and then they said, well, how do we do this? And you said, I have no clue. I'm not here to have the answer. I am asking the question so that you can discover the answer. So talk about what are some effective questions that people can ask themselves right now to be able to shift their focus and start to gain velocity.
Well, you don't know this, but I actually had trademarked when I started my career 30 years, the question man. I was known as, it was a trademark. It was a registered trademark. I let it die since then. And I had a client that I helped a lot. He was VP of sales for Hertz Equipment Rental, part of Hertz. And he was doing a video testimonial and I said, hey, bud, mention the question man, and he kept calling me the answer man. And we had 13 takes before he could finally get it right. And the reason was simple, because he didn't see me as asking a question. He saw me as having all the answers, but in fact, he had the answers. I was just asking him the right questions. That's the power of questions. So the story you're referring to is this company heard me speak at their sales meeting. I went up to the VP and I said, so, what's your biggest challenge? He goes, the biggest challenge is, we created this new reagent that cut in half the cost of mining copper. It took us a long time to bring it out. We bring it out. Industry buys every 3 years, bid lowest price. And we got competitors who re-engineered, not as good, but they beat us in price. It's a very common story. And the biggest player in that industry now is all their mines are up for bid. And he wanted me to come out and help him get ready for the meeting. And I flew out there and I asked him the one question, what do you want from me as a result of my intervention? And they went immediately into their old way of thinking. We want to win the bid. And I said, no, that was not my question. My question is, what do you want to create for yourself? The way you answered that question, you answered it from the past. This is the way it always worked in the past. We bid lowest price. That's how you get the deal every 3 years. But that does not mean that's the way it has to be going forward. But it starts with you thinking differently, not your client. So what we tell in the book, we call it a clean piece of paper exercise. Take out a clean piece of paper. Forget about what you know about your business. On that clean piece of paper, I just want you to write down your passion. What is it? If you had your way with the world and you can just have the destiny of your dreams, what would it be in this sense? And they started saying, well, why do we have to bid? I said, keep going. What do you want? Negotiation. Why? Because we saved this industry. Okay, so you want to negotiate a deal, not a bid. What else do you want? You have 25% of this player's business, 75%. I said, okay, they buy every 3 years, 10 years, life of the patents. So let me just repeat what you said. You said you don't want to bid. You want to negotiate a deal. You want to go from 25% to 75% of the demand. and you want to do this for a 10-year deal. And they said, that's right. And then they said to me, how are we going to do this? And I gave them the answer you mentioned before. I have no clue. And they go, what? We just hired a consultant. What are you talking about? And I said, look, how can I have the answers? We haven't even started the process of finding out issues, asking different questions of the client. I said, here's what you're going to have to do. And I learned this from a mentor, Nicole. We have intuition. Now, intuition we have to listen to, but intuition is only as good as the information that's in our body. But the intuition is everything. It's our experiences, what we want, what we don't want. It's the whole cauldron. So listen to your gut, okay? And my gut is telling me right now that you're not even doing 1/10 of what I'm going to suggest we possibly do. And I feel in my gut that you can get a lot more business from that account. Now, whether it's going to look exactly the way we have it here, I don't know yet. But I believe that there's a lot of opportunity. That's why I'm willing to do it with you. Now, the question is this. Do you trust me? And do you trust yourself to go through the process? Because many times as we go to do something new and we don't have historical data and we don't know how it's going to work, do we trust ourselves? Do we trust our gut? And so my mentor said, you got to listen to yourself, you got to trust, and you got to act. Yeah. Listen, trust, and act. And I thank you, Paul Dominguez, for those great words of advice. So now trust is earned, okay? Yeah. But they realized I wasn't bullshitting them. They realized that I was being very candid and vulnerable and saying I don't have the answers. I could have lost that deal. If I did, it wasn't a deal for me anyway, and that was fine. And they said, okay, what do we have to do? And I said, okay, let's tell me what you know about this deal and tell me what you don't know. So we went through what we know, what we don't know. They went back, and every quarter they come back with answers. We look at it. And then one day, just to tell you how this thing ran out, they called me up and they said, we got to be like Caterpillar. I said, why? Well, in commodities, you can't set the price. The exchange does. That's the only way you deal with your profitability is by keeping costs down. So Caterpillar put a man on site. A truck or a flat tire happens in a mine. They fix it immediately. I said, okay, so let's have a conversation. Let's talk about all the things that we could bring. You got your product already. We got that. But what else? Your IP, everything you got in this company, what could we bring? Oh, well, we could do telemetering possibly, so they don't have to do a lot of the invoicing, and we can know in advance and get it to them, and there's no drop in supply. What else could we do? We can do a mine site services where we're helping them evaluate best practice. All this stuff came out. We came up with 20 things. And I said, let's call it a mine site services program. And I said, trademark it. Just trademark it because that's your differentiation. The bottom line is we started talking about it. We put a man on site as part of the mine site services at our expense, just to prove to them the value. That person became so invaluable for them, they didn't want to let that person go. So when the bid came out, Nicole, what do you think a big part of the bid was? Mine site services program. Yeah. Because we created it, and the other two multinationals that were bidding queried, what's a mine site services? And that gave their client the legal right to take the bid away because they didn't have it. They were disqualified, and they entered into a negotiated deal. My client closed a $200 million contract in 18 months from that day that we started that. Wow. Now, that's the essence of the story, okay? Yeah. But it all started in the beginning, that clean piece of paper. Yeah. What do you want to create for yourself? The problem with the past is if all we do is let the past dictate what we think we can and cannot do, then we create the past. How many times do we say we want something different, but we're still getting the same results? That's because we were operating from the past. We never took that clean piece of paper to ask ourselves, forget what we know and don't know. What is it that we want to create for ourselves? And a salesperson can do that. What kind of relationship do you want to create? A company could be, what kind of a business do you want to create? You can go on down the line.
Use it in any area.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting is that with that is like you talk about the focus. You're creating an unprecedented future, and this show is about transformation. And a lot of times I find that people are trying to create what they call transformation, but it actually is the same thing repackaged, and it's the same. It's like Groundhog Day. It's the same thing. And they're going, it's transformation. It's like, well, no, transformation is taking one thing and turning it into something else. And so I love your description. Now let's talk about the art of the pause, because that's a really important piece of all of this and how it affects our velocity.
So everybody thinks velocity, you got to go, 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 go. No, 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 no. Sometimes you got to stop. Sometimes you got to pause, because if the things are not working for you, or you're not happy, or it's not working, why are you going to keep going? All you're doing is going to create more of the same and put yourself more of a jam. It's like one of my other mentors said, why keep putting good money after bad money if it's not working?
Yeah.
So I'll give you an
example. No one to hold them and no one to fold them.
Exactly.
Old Kenny Rogers song.
Yes. So when I was in sales, my first sales job was selling copies. It's funny, I got out of college. I wanted to be in medical sales because they all had the company cars, the expense account. And they wouldn't give me a job because I didn't have the experience. And I said, well, how do you get the experience if you're not given a chance? Funny thing is, some of my best success story as a consultant, speaker, have been medical device. The results have been stupendous, and now they line up, to bring me in. So for all of you looking for jobs in the beginning, don't get dispirited. Find your way to start. My way to start was when Royal Business Machines came to me and said, we'll give you a starting job as a salesperson for copiers. Now, and Nicole, I don't know how old you are, but for a lot of my audiences, in 1980, they weren't born yet. And so I say, look, don't freak out at what I'm about to tell you, but there was a major transformation in 1988, going from liquid toner to dry bond toner. No more muss and fuss, in your clothes, and you can just take a cartridge and swap it out. And they were seducing me with that on this copier, the Royal 115 copier, and they can do 15 clear, crisp copies. And I said, great, where's the collator? 6 months from now. Where's the duplicator? 6 months from now. So you just have this one machine at 15 great copies. He goes, yeah, but it's a great market. Go out and do that. Well, after 2 months, Nicole, my butt hurt so much, motor doors hitting me in the back, because I was not having the right conversation. I'd be going in, having a conversation about a copier. First thing they would do is, well, can you match what's in that big machine on the third floor from Xerox? Can it duplicate? No. Collate? No. Come back when you have that. Well, after making no money, a couple of things started happening. Number one, as we talk about in the book, I was creating stories in my mind. We all have stories. Stories are emotionally fueled. If they push you forward, great. But if they hold you back, the good news is whoever wrote it can rewrite it. So sometimes you pause to look at the story you're working on there so that you can rewrite it. The story I was working on is that I suck as a salesperson. I'll never sell a thing in my life. And my life is over. That's basically how I felt at that time. I needed to pause because that was not a great feeling. And obviously I wasn't getting better results. So I had a board meeting, me, myself, and I. We went to where you go in New Jersey when you want to have a self-board meeting. It was a diner. So I sat in a diner and I said, okay, there's a magic here, Nicole. When you become victims to your stories that don't work for you, the stories are emotionally fueled. And like I said, if it's good fuel, great, use it. If it's bad, we go down this rabbit hole. We're always going to have bad stories that we create for ourselves. And by the way, anytime someone says something to us, does something, we immediately create a story as to what we think that meant. And many times we're wrong. That's why relationships go off the rails for the wrong reasons or whatever. But I digress here. Let's get back to that story of the copier. My story was I can't sell. But when I realized it was just a story, you immediately get relaxed because you realize, oh my God, I can get rid of this negative thing, because here's the reality. Whoever wrote that story can simply rewrite it. It's just a story. And then when you realize that, that's when the pressure goes away. And that opens up the next thing you need, creativity. But you can't be creative when you're the victim of the story. So that's why we pause.
That's
We
good.
pause to realize what's happening, we realize what stories we're under, and say, okay, we don't like it. Let me create a new one. So when I'm in the diner, I said, okay, what was going on? I'm talking about copiers. What do they do? They compare me to that machine. Can I compete? No. Well, when I wrote Lead So Get Out of the Way, that led to that book because I told salespeople, don't compete, create. So I said, if I want to create, and I can't compete against that. So I asked myself, what's a copier? Well, it's a communication vehicle. So maybe I go have a conversation about that. And I tried it, no guarantees. And I walked in, I said to the office manager, and they simply said, would you agree that a copier is nothing more than a communication vehicle? And she goes, absolutely. I said, when it comes to that, what are your three biggest challenges? And Nicole, all of a sudden, it felt like I was her therapist and she was laying on my couch. She goes, can we talk? Sally or James is on the first floor and needs one copy. They get up, they chit chat with everybody, they go up the stairs. The time they get to the third floor, they got to wait behind all these huge jobs to make their one copy. Make it, come back on that return trip, talk to everybody. It could take them 2 hours. I said, wow, how often does that happen? She goes, try the equivalent of 2 full-time employees. So,
Wow.
whoa, how would you like them back? She goes, how are you going to get them back to me? I said, look, I'm not competing with that machine on that third floor. It's a great machine. Keep it. You need it. But what you don't have is something for those 1 and 2 jobs. I suggest you don't buy one of my machines. Nah, that's not going to help you. You need 3, 1 on every floor. So that James and Sally's on each floor can go in there, get that copy done within 5 minutes, and you'll get your 2 full-time employees back. And Nicole, I sold 3 units that day.
That's awesome. And so powerful. Yes.
But you got to understand one thing. Same machine.
Yep.
Same limitations from the company. We didn't have the collator, right? The only thing that changed was how I thought, my mindset, looking at what was working and not, and coming up with a different conversation that would make both of us winners, her and I.
Yeah.
And that starts and ends with each and every one of us.
Yeah. Well, and it comes back to focus. What are you focusing on? And so much of our time, I think, is focused on the past, or focused on the problem, or focused on what we can't do. I think of Tony Robbins, who talks about change your focus, change your words, change your state. You know, it starts with focus. What are we focusing on?
And don't focus on competing.
Yeah.
Like, you know, a lot, and this is in our
That's a
personal lives.
scarcity mindset.
Yeah, because we all look at, oh, this person's got more awards than I do, more money, or this more. It's fine, but it's not going to get you anywhere. Don't compete, create.
Yeah.
The money and success comes to those who create.
Yeah.
Look for the gaps in people's lives. Look for the gaps in your kids' lives and help them through it. Look for the gaps in your customers' lines and help them through it. There is no competition when you fill those gaps because no one else is doing it already.
Right.
You know? And remember, whatever we're selling, they're not buying that. This is a key part. They're not buying that. They're buying what it does for them.
Yes.
And that's what you have to lead with, because that's what gets the engagement of the brain.
Awesome. Before we finish off, let's talk about the world right now, and let's step out from leader standpoint. We've been talking about sales. We've been talking about where you can apply it in different ways and so forth. What would it look like? Really, what would it look like in your mind when you created this velocity mindset, trademarked it, and wrote the book and teach this? You know, you have this vision of what that would create. So I'd love to hear a little bit of that. What would the world look like?
Yeah, and that's a
if
challenge.
everyone lived
And
in this?
that's a challenge I'm having because I'm known for sales and leadership.
Yeah.
And I need to,
Well, life is sales. I mean, it's the number one skill.
I understand. I have to keep it on how it's going to help you with the sales, but I have a higher calling right now.
Yeah. Talk about that.
I'm sorry?
Talk about that. That's what I want to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was president of the National Speakers Association. It was like a 4-year deal, vice president, president-elect. You get the hint. And with the year I was actually president, I was only home 4 days a month because I'm traveling the world. My time's not my own. I got to keep my business going. Got NSA to worry about. Right after my presidency, it's literally like the president of the United States. The moment you walk out of office, your detail disappears, all the things disappears, the phone calls, and you start questioning your value. Add on top of that, I had 9 surgeries in 3 years. Mostly on my back. I have 9 levels fused. I had a lot of pain. I couldn't speak for a while. And that did a job on me. But as I was sitting there, I started looking at my successes, and I've had quite a few. But then I started looking at my bucket list because I'm 57. And I started asking myself, well, how come you didn't get these things done? And I realized that it was nothing more than my stories and my fears and limitations. And I said, okay, you're in the back 9 of your life now. So you better do something with those stories because you want to be fulfilled, when your time is up. And I just realized a lot of people are living life like that. So I had a higher calling right now to say, I want to go and approach as many people as possible through my work to let them know that there are ways that they can break through those limiting beliefs and stories so that they can get to where they really want to be in life. So the premise of the book, besides helping people in sales and leadership, the premise of the book was, what would the world look like if everybody acted like a leader and not a victim of circumstance? And what I mean by that is that we're all leaders of our lives. You don't need a manager's position. We're all leaders of lives. We decide where we're going. We decide what actions we're going to take. We make decisions. And many times those decisions and actions are limited by our belief systems, our stories, and things that hold us back. And what would the world be like if people knew how to deal with those things? What would be the world? How would the world be different? And it would be hugely different because we wouldn't be blaming anything if something didn't go right. We wouldn't be blaming others. What I say in the book, a true leader, when something goes wrong or even right, the first thing they don't do is they don't blame you, or they don't blame the fact that the copier company didn't come out with the collator faster. They start asking themselves this one central question: what can I do differently next time? I was watching an interview, and they said, and Sean Payton said of Drew Brees is that one thing Drew did after every game, whether he won or lost, he went back on the football field and went through his progressions to see what could he do a little differently next time. Mm. So if you really want to make some significant changes in your lives, just focus on, okay, here's what we did. Now, if I wanted to do something differently, what would that be? What could I do differently?
Yeah, that's so good. And there is an assumption there, and I'm, always wary of assumptions, but there is an assumption there or a belief there that I can do something differently. And so there's a possibility there, and even do something in the world. I've heard even recently a lot of people going like, what can I do? What can one person do? Well, how many times have we seen one person make a difference?
We have an example right now. President Zelensky.
Yeah.
Of the Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean,
people are stepping up and going, wow, that guy.
His leadership.
Yeah.
Willingness not to leave, not to abandon. He's going to be there. We're fighting this. His ability to marshal the entire population of the country to pick up arms and be there. Russia is not dealing with the Ukrainian military. Russia is dealing with the entire population right now. And when you look at the sands of time and the breakdown of the old Soviet Union, it wasn't because, Reagan sat there and just said, knock down that wall, and bring down the wall in East Berlin and Russia to get rid of the Soviet Union. It was actually the people inside of those countries that rose up with their voice. And that's what changed. If they weren't rising up and taking the risk like the people in Ukraine are taking, no matter what anybody did on the outside, it wouldn't have worked. So that's what happens to your question, Nicole, as to what individuals can do.
I love it. Ron, thank you so much for being here. I think that's a great place to end. I'm going to encourage our listeners to go get a copy of Velocity Mindset. Also, go check out Lead, Sell, or Get Out of the Way. That's a best-selling book and timeless. So, go ahead and get a copy of both of those books. Ron, then go to ronkarr.com. Anywhere else that you want to recommend or what you want to recommend they do as a
They can
next
also
step?
go to velocitymindset.com. That's velocitymindset.com. It's actually part of ronkarr.com. But on that page, hey, we ask for your email because we put videos out every Friday, so you stay in that conversation. But there's also a free leadership assessment. Now, the assessment is just 5 questions for you to gauge yourself. But most importantly, you get immediately tips and best practices on what you can do today to increase velocity in your life and make your life meaningful.
Beautiful. We'll make sure all of that's in the show notes as well, the links and everything, so you can get that information. Again, Ron, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you. Thank you for our listeners and our viewers being here as well. I trust that this helped you to refocus back on what's most important. Stop focusing on the past, stop focusing on what you can't do, start focusing on asking yourself different questions so that you can focus on the possibility. Where are you going? And even why do you want to go there? Why is it important to you? And why is it important to you now? And so you can have that motivation, that inspiration to move you forward. So I encourage you to do that. Leaders of transformation, they take action. So just listening to podcasts, it's great. It's nice information. We're planting seeds and so forth. But it's when you fertilize those seeds, is when you actually do something with that. That's where the change happens. So we encourage you to do that. We'd love to hear your story. You can go on leadersoftransformation.com, reach out to us there, let us know how this has impacted you. You, of course, can go on social media and find us there as well. And we'd love to hear what you're doing to make a greater impact in the world, because together we can all change this world and make it a better place for everyone. So with that, again, thank you for being here. We look forward to seeing you next week on the next episode of Leaders Transformation.